It was a summer morning on July 20th, 1944. The war was nearing its breaking point. The Allies were closing in on Germany from the west, while the Eastern Front was collapsing under the weight of Soviet forces. Inside the walls of Wolfschanz, the Führer's imposing headquarters in East Prussia, Adolf Hitler sat at the head of a long table, surrounded by his closest officers and generals. The thunder of war raged outside, but in that room the Führer remained the unchallenged ruler of the Third Reich. What Hitler didn't know was that a group of his most trusted officers were preparing to change the course of history. They were part of a secret conspiracy, a rebellion that had been growing for months, fueled by disillusionment and a sense of duty to save their country from the madness of a war Hitler had unleashed. Among them was Colonel Claus von Stauffenberg, a man whose name would forever be linked to the boldest assassination attempt in history. Severely wounded in North Africa, losing his left eye, hand, and several fingers, Stauffenberg had witnessed the horrors of war firsthand. His body bore the scars, but his mind was even more scarred by the sight of the destruction Hitler had caused to Germany and the world. For Stauffenberg, Hitler was no longer a leader. He was a tyrant, a dictator whose madness had brought nothing but suffering. Stauffenberg was not alone in his convictions. Around him was a group of officers, military commanders, and even civilians, individuals who had quietly resisted the Führer's regime from the shadows. They were men who had seen the atrocities of the Holocaust, the devastation of the war, and the suffering of their people, and they had reached a breaking point. They were ready to act. In their hands lay Operation Valkyrie, a plan that began as a contingency for civil unrest, but was twisted into an opportunity to dismantle Hitler's power structure. The idea was simple. After assassinating Hitler, the conspirators would activate the reserve army using Valkyrie, a plan originally meant to defend the Reich from internal rebellion, and use it to arrest key Nazi officials and take control of Germany. The plot had the potential to end the war and spare Germany from further destruction, but it all hinged on one crucial moment: the assassination of Adolf Hitler. The stage was set. The conspirators meticulously planned their actions, choosing the perfect opportunity to strike. The plan was clear. Stauffenberg would carry a bomb in a briefcase, place it under the table during a meeting at Wolfschanz, and detonate it. His mission was set for July 20th, during a high-level meeting that would include Hitler himself. In the days leading up to the plot, the conspirators had gone to great lengths to prepare. They smuggled in explosive devices and rehearsed their roles with the precision of soldiers on a battlefield. Everything was set. The moment Stauffenberg would place the briefcase under the table, the plot would unfold like clockwork. But nothing, as history would show, ever goes according to plan. On the morning of July 20th, Stauffenberg, dressed in his military uniform, arrived at Wolfschanz. His heart raced, but his resolve was firm. He had one objective: to remove the man who had brought his country to the edge of ruin. As he entered the conference room, he was greeted by Hitler's entourage, all oblivious to the fact that one of their own was determined to bring about the downfall of their leader. Stauffenberg placed the briefcase containing 2 bombs underneath the wooden table just a few feet from Hitler. It was a perfect position, close enough to ensure the blast would be fatal. He excused himself from the meeting under the pretense of urgent business and made his way out of the room. At that moment, the conspirators waited anxiously at a nearby location. The bomb would go off in minutes, and when it did, the world would be forever changed. But then something terribly went wrong. The bomb exploded, sending a deafening roar through the air, shaking the foundations of the building. When the smoke cleared, the room was a scene of chaos. 3 men lay dead, including Hitler's closest bodyguard. But Hitler himself, miraculously, was alive, unscathed. How had he survived? The answer lay in the positioning of the briefcase. Unbeknownst to the conspirators, one of Hitler's aides had moved the briefcase behind a heavy wooden table leg. The blast was partially absorbed, sparing Hitler from the full force of the explosion. He suffered only superficial injuries: a perforated eardrum,
burns, and a few cuts, but his life was not in danger. Hitler's survival sent shockwaves through the conspirators. The carefully laid plans were now in jeopardy. Stauffenberg, having left the scene, didn't know whether the plot had succeeded or failed. As news spread that Hitler had survived, the question remained, what now? As Stauffenberg and his fellow conspirators waited for confirmation of Hitler's death, the world around them began to crumble. Despite their best efforts, the operation had failed. The conspirators had underestimated the loyalty of the Nazi system. SS officers loyal to Hitler were already mobilizing. General Wegener, a key conspirator, failed to execute his part of the coup. Ulbricht, the mastermind behind the military actions, hesitated, unsure whether to push forward without confirmation of Hitler's death. Within hours, it was clear. The plot had failed. The failure of the assassination attempt set off a violent chain reaction. The conspirators were swiftly arrested, and a brutal crackdown followed. Stauffenberg, along with dozens of his co-conspirators, was executed by firing squad. The Gestapo hunted down anyone associated with the plot, arresting family members, friends, and even people who had no direct involvement. The Nazi regime, humiliated and enraged, sought vengeance against all who dared to defy it. The failure of Operation Valkyrie, however, revealed something profound about the Nazi regime. Even among Hitler's closest followers, there was deep-seated opposition. Men like Stauffenberg and his colleagues had risked everything for the hope of a better Germany, one free from Hitler's tyranny. But their attempt to end the war and bring about peace had cost them their lives. Though Operation Valkyrie failed, it marked a pivotal moment in history. It showed that not all Germans were loyal to Hitler, and it shattered the myth that the Nazi regime was invulnerable. The plot also revealed deep divisions within the military and the Nazi leadership. In the end, it wasn't just the assassination attempt that failed. It was the wider system of loyalty and fear that Hitler had created, one that ultimately could not shield him from the very men who had once been his most trusted.